Pretty quiet here in Mission Control Houston, as well as obviously aboard Dragon and the International Space Station, as this is a fully autonomous flight, and everything continues to go well for Dragon and its arrival this morning. Again, Dragon has reached waypoint 0 and is making its way to waypoint 1, 220 meters above the International Space Station and its intended destination this morning, which is the space-facing hatch on Node 2. So with that, I'm going to send it back over to Hawthorne for a status update. Kate and Duke?
Thanks, Leah. Continuing to follow Dragon's progress as it gets closer and closer to the International Space Station. We're now just 0.45 kilometers away from the ISS. And as Leah mentioned, slow and steady wins the race. Now, there are teams supporting this mission from multiple locations. This is Johnson Space Center, located in Houston, Texas. This mission control room is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Team members are trained in a variety of disciplines and monitor all station systems. In addition to this control room, we have the mission control room here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. That's the view there on the left-hand side of your screen. That is where our teams are monitoring Dragon and checking in on all of its systems. And then, of course, the Axiom control room on the right-hand side.
Yeah, right there for Axiom Space. Our team is there at Mission Control in Houston as well. It's pretty fantastic. From this secure facility, we have live access to all the voice, video, and data from the ISS and can work alongside their NASA counterparts to run on-orbit operations and monitor every aspect of the mission in real time. It's led by what we call our AXL, or our Axiom Operations Lead. And there are various positions around the room for research, communications, medical, integration, stowage, timeline operations, etc. It's a pretty significant step in our journey as a company to expand access to low Earth orbit, as it's only the 12th ground segment partner for the ISS program. So through this facility, we are enabling our customers in the global community a front row seat to the work being done on station.
So as you can see, lots of people supporting this mission from all different locations. It really is a team effort to execute these integrated operations successfully. And part of the reason is, as you can see, it's not just the 4 crew members that are inside Dragon Freedom right now approaching the space station. It's the whole integrated International Space Station team as a whole. Once the AX2 crew arrives on station, there will actually be 11 crew members total, and it's going to be pretty exciting. Like Leah said, a full house, but the AX2 crew is going to be super busy. They have a lot of science and research planned, and they will also be contributing to the station as well as the other crewmates that are up there with them.
Absolutely. This crew has a very full schedule while on station, and actually a lot of that time will be focused on some pretty fascinating efforts. For the sake of this conversation that we'll have right now, the science that they're doing is organized into a few categories like life sciences, physical sciences, tech demonstrations, etc. So with physical science, this includes some radiation protection research as well as some storm-related research, helping to create rain and cloud seeding, really fascinating stuff like that, and as well as enhance our understanding of dangerous thunderstorms. There's actually a phenomenon called transient luminous effects, which are upper atmospheric lightning or ionospheric lightning.
And it's awesome that research could potentially help operations at Kennedy Space Center. As we saw yesterday, there was an anvil cloud rolling in, and it's really interesting how this research that the AX2 crew will do could potentially feed back into space operations on the ground.
Absolutely. A very full circle moment right there. So by the time we're launching AX3, we will have those data back and we'll be ahead of the game. So on the tech side of research being conducted, this crew will also demonstrate ways to automate some of the tasks that take up precious crew time, things like transferring data or tracking where supplies and materials are on board the space station. There's also an effort to make communicating with Earth easier. So at the heart of Axiom Space is the mantra to build history, to expand access to low Earth orbit for all. And so we're dedicated to creating partnerships with companies that you wouldn't typically expect to hear about going to space, to grow the volume of those who can conduct meaningful research and research on board and outreach as well about science and everything else included in that. So a lot going on up there, and they're certainly going to have their hands full once they dock, which we should be seeing shortly here.
Yeah, we're very much looking forward to it. Look at this. This is our first view inside the Dragon capsule. I love this view. So on the left-hand side would be our commander, Peggy Whitson, and on the right-hand side of that view was pilot John Shoffner. Now, this view is also very cool because this is looking at the International Space Station from the Dragon.
What a great shot.
Yeah, it's just incredible that we can get these live views and see what Dragon is seeing as it is approaching the ISS.
I love living in the future.
Like we've mentioned before, we are heading to the Node 2 Zenith port this morning. We have passed through waypoint 0, which is the 400-meter mark, which is 400 meters away from station. We're heading up and around over the station to waypoint 1, which is about...
Dragon station on the big loop. Expect reconfiguration of the C2V2 return link shortly.
Dragon copies.
Station copies.
So that was SpaceX core David Huang just letting the crew know of this upcoming event, referring to C2V2, which is the Common Communication for Visiting Vehicle. And that's basically just the link for the visiting vehicle, in this case, Dragon Freedom. But yeah, this view is over the shoulders of our commander and pilot, and I love that you can see what they're seeing. In the center, we can see that they are following along with the upcoming events. The views on the far left and far right panel will illustrate which thrusters are firing when. So I don't really see any. Oh, we can see a little bit of light flashing. So if you look at the far left panel and the upper right hand corner, we saw some illumination there indicating that the Draco thrusters were firing. And one thing that I love about our views as we get closer to the International Space Station, the views that we will get from the ISS looking at Dragon, we should actually be able to see those Draco thrusters firing as Dragon is autonomously steering itself toward that Zenith port. Now, when we say autonomous, it's truly what that means. Dragon is doing all the calculations and steering and flying automatically. It is flying itself. That being said, our pilot, John Shoffner, has the capability to take over manual control at any time if necessary. But it is incredible to be able to see what they're seeing. Oh, in that view on the left-hand side there, we can actually see those thrusters, as I mentioned. It almost looks as if Dragon is like spitting out a little bit, and it's just really cool to be able to see that propulsion system in action as Dragon is flying itself to that Zenith port. And I love it with those two views that we just had because it's Dragon looking at station as well as station looking at Dragon, which always kind of reminds me of the Spider-Man meme them pointing at each other.
It's a very meta moment. In that image on the right, you see our Commander Peggy Whitson on the left, pilot John Shoffner on the right, and out of frame our mission specialists Rihanna Barnawi and Ali Al-Karni. Likely also monitoring all these events. Everyone on board this Dragon is probably very, very anxiously awaiting this moment of docking. Ending nearly a 16-hour transit to get to the ISS after launching.
Now we are roughly 20 minutes away from hitting that approach 1, that waypoint 1, which, like I mentioned before, is 220 meters away from the International Space Station. And we can see that the crew has their visors up. We don't require them to put their visors down until they're closer to the space station for that docking procedure. So they're still hanging out, continuing to monitor Dragon's progress. As we said before, once the 4 Axiom 2 crew members get on station, they're going to be there for 8 days, and they're going to be very busy. When you're on station, your schedule is packed with science and research, sleeping. Your sleep periods are scheduled to ensure that everybody's getting appropriate rest, your meal times, and then, of course, you have to build in some exercise time as well. But yeah, the crew will be very busy once they get on station. So these final moments before they actually arrive might actually be very calm and restful because, like we said before, the crew right now, they are monitoring, they are keeping an eye on Dragon systems, and of course keeping in contact with the integrated operations teams from all 3 mission control centers that we mentioned before. Once again, this is a live view of the International Space Station from Dragon. It almost looks fake. It's so clear and beautiful. As we get closer, you should be able to make out more clearly the various vehicles that are docked with the International Space Station. Once we get closer, I definitely want to keep an eye on to those various ports. As we mentioned, we did a port relocation maneuver for the Crew 6 capsule.
Dragon station on the Big Loop. C2V2 link reconfiguration complete.
Dragon copy. C2V2 config complete.
As I mentioned, we did a port relocation maneuver for the Crew 6 capsule, which is Dragon in Denver. It was relocated to the Node 2 forward port, and we should be able to see that as we get closer. And I just love it when there is a Dragon capsule getting a view of another Dragon capsule that is on station. We had that view during the Crew 6 docking, if I remember correctly. So this is a live view coming to us from the International Space Station of Dragon Freedom as it approaches. All right, so as we are continuing to get closer to the International Space Station, we are heading towards that waypoint 1. Let's check back in with Leah over at Johnson Space Center to hear how things are continuing to progress with the International Space Station's preparation for Dragon Freedom.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Duke. Thanks for carrying us through a little bit of that. And yes, that's no moon. That is Dragon approaching the International Space Station. As you heard, we've reached waypoint 0, that 400 meters away from the space station. We're just a little bit below that now. But as you can see, we've made quite a bit of movement. Our previous view of Dragon had the Earth in the background. Now we have space in the background. The spacecraft has moved out in front of the International Space Station, still less than 400 meters away, about 380 meters right now, but we're moving up to waypoint 1. And again, waypoint 1 is about 220 meters away from the space station. It'll be directly above that Node 2 zenith or space-facing port. We have the opportunity to pause here, check out any systems if needed, and we expect arrival at waypoint 1 in about 10 minutes. Once Dragon reaches waypoint 1, the next stop is waypoint 2. That is only 20 meters away from the International Space Station, so that's when we hope to get that crystal clear view of Dragon Freedom and its 4 crew members inside. We do conduct a hold at waypoint 2. This is to make sure that we are properly aligned with the docking target on Node 2, also known as Harmony. After reaching waypoint 2, Dragon will slowly but surely move in and dock with that port, conducting a soft capture first before the hooks begin to drive and complete a hard capture. Then it takes about 2 hours until Dragon hatches are ready to be opened and the 4 new crew members make their way aboard the space station. Now 350 meters away from the station. Again, this is Dragon Freedom. It was named that by the Crew 4 crew that visited the International Space Station. Spacecraft keep their names after being named by the crew, so this one will always carry the name Freedom regardless of who's flying on board. On the International Space Station side, things continue to move smoothly. Again, we have NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg in the cupola along with UAE astronaut Sultan Al-Nayati. They're monitoring Dragon's approach. It is a fully autonomous flight for the visiting spacecraft, meaning there is no action required on part of the crew. However, they do have the ability to take control if needed, as well as the crew aboard the space station can send commands to Dragon to retreat if necessary. But we're not expecting any of that this morning as things continue to move smoothly, now 330 meters away from the orbiting laboratory. On the space station side, the solar arrays have been configured. Again, teams here in Mission Control Houston will command the solar arrays into a position, we call it being feathered. This keeps any loads from being imparted on the solar arrays themselves from any plumes that come from Dragon as it makes those fine-tuned maneuvers. We are in a satellite handover again with the tracking data and relay satellite systems, but a great shot here of mission control at SpaceX in Hawthorne, California. Again, we are in integrated operations now that we are inside the approach ellipsoid, that 4 kilometer by 2 by 2 kilometer invisible oval that helps us monitor all of the arriving and departing spacecraft at the International Space Station. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you've got Mission Control Houston. These teams work around the clock, 24/7, to monitor all of the station's systems. Leading the teams this morning is Flight Director Marcos Flores. And communicating with the astronauts aboard the International Space Station is Capcom, or Capsule Communicator, Justin Cartledge. On the left now, you can see the Axiom Space Flight Control Room. They are monitoring the flight as well. They'll remain on console this week to help the crew members execute all of the research and the payload work that they have planned. Additionally, they'll be conducting several downlink events with various media and other STEM organizations here on Earth. Now just 290 meters away from the space station and closing in. Again, slow and steady. We are less than 1 mile per hour as we see Crew Dragon move toward the International Space Station Zenith port. Once we reach that, it'll be waypoint 1. We hope to see that in about 5 minutes, and we're tracking docking again this morning at 8:10 a.m. Central Time, so just about 20 minutes from now. So look back at what has brought Dragon to this point. Less than an hour after liftoff last night at about 5:23 p.m. Central Time, Dragon executed the phase burn. This was the first of those 5 major burns. This raised Dragon's orbit using the Draco thrusters, and about 7 hours later we had the boost burn. This put our crew in an orbit where Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of its orbit around the Earth, is 10 kilometers lower than the space station. After that, we execute the close co-elliptic burn, and this puts Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the station. So it means it maintains that orbit about 10 kilometers lower than the station all the way around instead of just at apogee. The transfer burn occurred at about 2:47 a.m. this morning, Central Time. This is where we raised Dragon's apogee. Again, that's the highest point of its orbit to just 2.5 kilometers lower than the station. We want to make that co-elliptic one more time, so we round that out with the final co-elliptic burn. That was at 3:34 a.m. Central this morning, maintaining the constant orbit about 2.5 kilometers below the station. We also saw the approach initiation burn just at the start of today's broadcast. This really begins the final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the station, and we started integrated operations between the Dragon control team in Hawthorne and the space station flight controllers here in Mission Control Houston. This approach initiation brought us up to waypoint 0. Waypoint 0 is 400 meters below the station. This is the first checkpoint during the approach. We have now entered the approach ellipsoid, that first boundary of monitoring the arrival and departure of visiting vehicles. Of course, we didn't even have to hold at that 400 meters. All of the systems checked out, and Dragon has continued its approach to waypoint 1. This happens when we are about 220 meters away from the space station. We're currently 240 meters away, so we're getting very close, and that 220 meters at waypoint 1 puts us on the docking axis, meaning it's directly above the docking port. So we're heading toward the zenith port of the International Space Station's Node 2 module, also known as Harmony. Currently docked to the forward port, we have Dragon Endeavour, which brought the Crew 6 crew. So once Dragon is only 20 meters away...
on the big loop, approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue approach to waypoint 2. Reminder that manual impulsive retreat recovery is not permitted.
Dragon copy.
Mission copies.
And confirmation that the spacecraft has arrived at waypoint 1. Again, we have the opportunity to hold here. It's 220 meters away from the International Space Station, specifically in line with the docking axis on the zenith port of Node 2. And you can see some of those thruster plumes coming from Dragon as it fine-tunes its approach using those service section Draco thrusters. A great view of those thrusters firing on Dragon as we are at waypoint 1, 220 meters away from the International Space Station, specifically directly above the space station. And inside Dragon right now, we have our 4 private astronauts, Peggy Whitson, the commander, pilot John Shoffner, Raona Barnawi, and Ali Arkhani.
Block Bravo. With you on the big loop. High range 208 meters and decreasing attitude as expected. We copy and concur from the ground.
Beautiful view for a moment there. We have of Dragon, this courtesy of Cronus. Cronus flight controller here this morning is Brian Crisp in Mission Control Houston. Dragon's thrusters continue to fire. We are now less than 200 meters away from the space station. We have passed through waypoint 1 as well as the keep out sphere. And the keep out sphere is that 200 meter radius around the International Space Station, another invisible boundary that helps us monitor our arriving and departing vehicles. The next pause for Dragon will be at waypoint 2. This is a hold point. That's 20 meters away from the International Space Station when we move in toward final docking. In this view of Dragon Freedom, you can see the hatch or the nose cone is opened and a good view of those 4 forward bulkhead thrusters. Those are used for the larger burns. We are now using the 12 service section Draco thrusters. These are for more fine-tuned attitude maneuvers, especially as we get closer to the International Space Station. The nose cone protects those thrusters as well as the docking mechanisms aboard Dragon. We're expecting arrival at waypoint 2 in about 8 minutes. And again, looking for docking this morning at approximately 8:10 a.m. Central Time. Dragon Freedom is now 164 meters away from the International Space Station. So while we are moving less than 1 mile per hour, we are continuing to close in on the destination for the AX-2 crew.
That's Dragon on the big blue. Visors are closed for all 4 crews.
Copy, Dragon. Visors are closed.
As we've mentioned earlier, the AX-2 crew are in their suits and in their seats. We got that view over their shoulders this morning. They do not have to wear their suits for the entirety of the flight. When they are not in these dynamic operations periods, they are welcome to take those off and get into some more comfortable attire specifically for their sleep portion of their flight. However, now they are in their suits. They've conducted suit leak checks through the umbilicals that connect to the spacecraft itself. These also provide communications and cooling for the astronauts. And as you heard Commander Peggy Whitson just report down to the ground, the visors have been closed on the suits, so they are preparing for docking. And again, we're looking for that about 10 minutes from now. We do have some time and some hold time that we can conduct at waypoint 2 if needed. We can wait until lighting conditions are preferred for Dragon to move in for its final docking. Once Dragon flies in and makes contact with the International Docking Adapter, we will have soft capture. This is when the soft capture ring retracts, and sensors will indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place. Once those hooks have fully driven, we'll have hard capture, and that firmly secures Dragon to its new home on the space station. Now just 130 meters from the International Space Station, everything continuing to move smoothly for Dragon.
Station on the Big Loop, our review of steps 5 and 6 is complete and ISS is ready for docking.
Houston copies.
We are in another satellite handover and expect to regain video of the crew aboard Dragon as well as from the International Space Station shortly. However, things
Dragon
continuing
station
to
on the
check
Big
out here.
Loop, soft capture ring extension complete.
Dragon copies.
Station copies.
Station Houston on the Big Loop. At waypoint 2, Dragon will briefly pause to align for docking, then automatically resume approach.
Station copies.
We are less than 100 meters from the International Space Station. Currently, Flight Director Marcos Flores here in Mission Control Houston is polling all of the team members in this room, conducting their go-no-go poll for docking. Just heard confirmation
Dragon
that
station
Mission Control
on the
Houston
Big
is
Loop.
go.
Confirm crew readiness for final approach. Ground has pulled go for approach 2 and will be commanding approach allowed shortly. As a reminder that once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
And the Dragon crew is ready to go for docking, and we copy on the crew hands-off point.
Station crew copies, and we are ready for final approach.
A lot of voices in the mix there, the last one being from NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg, who's in the cupola monitoring docking this morning. And good words from all of the teams that they are go for docking. Dragon is now less than 60 meters away from the International Space Station. We're expecting arrival at waypoint 2 in 2 minutes. Again, that'll be the 20 meters away from the International Space Station, directly above the Node 2 Zenith docking port. We do have a pause at waypoint 2, and they can hold there for an extended period of time if need be, if they want to wait for lighting conditions to change or to check out systems any further. However, things continuing to look good this morning. Currently, the International Space Station and Dragon are flying 262 statute miles over Russia in an orbital nighttime. Dragon now 34 meters away from the International Space Station. We also heard confirmation earlier from teams here on the ground that the soft capture ring is properly extended. This will be the first step in the docking process. Dragon will make contact with the International Space Station, and that docking ring, or the soft capture ring, will retract, pulling it in until it's time for the 2 sets of 6 hooks, so 12 hooks in total, to make the hard capture to the International Space Station. Standing by for arrival at waypoint 2. Dragon Freedom and the AX2 crew have arrived at waypoint 2, just 20 meters from the International Space Station. Teams here are all on the ground are all go for docking, as well as aboard the International Space Station and Dragon itself. Again, this graphic just a look at what we have seen so far, most recently this morning when Dragon arrived at waypoint 0, 400 meters away from the space station, moving into waypoint 1, 220 meters directly above and on the docking axis. We have now moved down from that 220 meters into just 20 meters from the International Space Station, directly above the Node 2 Zenith port. This is a hold point
Station
for Dragon.
Houston on the big loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. Monitor per steps 5 and 6 in 1.102. Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Station copies in work.
Again, we do not have video feed from the International Space Station or Dragon at this time, but teams continue to monitor its approach to the space station itself. We have now left that waypoint 2 hold point of 20 meters away, now about 16 meters from the International Space Station. Dragon Freedom and the AX2 crew now moving at 0.2 miles per hour. All 4 crew members suited and in their seats, preparing for docking.
Meters.
Copy, 10 meters.
As you can hear, the Dragon crew are able to view the status of their docking on the crew display screens, reporting that they are now 10 meters and actually less than 10 meters away from the Node 2 Zenith or space-facing port on the International Space Station.
Meters.
Copy, 5 meters.
Still moving 0.2 miles per hour. Dragon Freedom is now 5 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, we do not have video feed of the spacecraft at this time, but team members are able to track its status, and everything continues to go as planned. The crew is now 3 meters from the space station.
Meters, chop.
Copy, 2 meters.
Hands off.
CHOP stands for the crew hands-off point, now 2 meters from the station, standing by for
1
docking.
meter.
Copy, 1 meter. Soft capture confirmed.
And we have confirmation that the Axiom 2 crew has docked to the International Space Station at
retracting in
8:12
progress.
a.m. Central Time. That self-capture ring now beginning to retract and pull Dragon in toward the International Space Station. Docking coming as the space station itself was flying 262 statute miles northeast of Japan.
And correction on last, we're still waiting on attenuation.
Continuing to get good reports here from teams on the ground. Again, aboard the International Space Station, NASA's Woody Hoburg and UAE's Sultan Al Nayati continued to monitor the crew as well. After soft capture is complete, those 12 hooks will begin to drive and pull Dragon firmly securing it to the Node 2 Zenith port.
And Dragon, now we have ring retraction in progress.
Dragon copies. That's the softest docking I've ever had.
Good words from commander of the AX-2 mission, former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson, now flying her third spacecraft after having flown the Space Shuttle, a Roscosmos-Soyuz, and now a SpaceX Dragon. That soft capture ring continues to retract. Again, this is the first stage in docking. Shortly after ring retraction is complete, we will move into the hard docking portion. This is when those 12 hooks, 2 sets of 6, drive and firmly secure the spacecraft to the Node 2 Zenith port. Again, just a few weeks ago, the Node 2 Zenith port was occupied by another SpaceX Dragon. Dragon was relocated by the Crew 6 crew who arrived on that spacecraft from the forward port, or from the Zenith port where Dragon Freedom now is, to the forward port. Again, we expect the Axiom 2 crew to live and work aboard the International Space Station for about 8 days before beginning their return journey to Earth.
Ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
We have confirmation that the ring retraction is complete. Next steps for this hard capture will be for those 12 hooks to drive. In addition to the ring retraction and these hooks driving, an umbilical will also be connected from Dragon to the International Space Station. This will allow power to flow from the space station to Dragon itself, so that Dragon is no longer relying on battery power, that power being gathered from the solar cells around the base of its trunk. Again, we are in a handover of our satellites for KU, which is what brings down our video. We do have audio communication with the crew through our S-band.
MCS configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Teams reporting that we're properly configured for hard capture. Again, this is 12 hooks, 2 sets of 6. They will drive the first 6, and if those are firmly latched, they will then drive the next 6. We do see those first 6 hooks now starting to drive. The first 6 hooks continue to drive in the hard capture process. Again, after these, we'll have another set of 6 before we can officially declare that Dragon is firmly secured to the International Space Station. Everything continuing to go as planned this morning. Again, docking coming at 8:12 a.m. Central Time. We have confirmation that the first set of 6 hooks have now closed and the second set are driving. Again, this view from Mission Control Houston as teams are monitoring the docking of Dragon Freedom to the node 2 zenith or
on the Big Loop on behalf of the Expedition 69 crew. Peggy, welcome back. John, welcome to the International Space Station. And Ali and Rihanna, ahlan wa sahlan.
Thank you so much for the AX2 crew. We're really looking forward to working with you guys this week.
Likewise, we'll see you guys very soon.
And we have confirmation the second set of hooks has closed from Dragon on the International Space Station, meaning hard capture is complete.
Dragon Station, hard capture complete.
I can copy.
And with that call, hard capture is complete. Dragon is firmly attached to the International Space Station. It's home for at least the next 8 days. NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg on the space station side will now move into preparing the hatches for opening. Again, that takes about a 2-hour process. The vestibule needs to be pressurized, the area in between the space station and Dragon. Coming up, the AX2 crew will have the chance to doff or take off their spacesuits, maybe get into their flight suits before they float aboard, and we begin our welcome ceremony.
And Dragon SpaceX docking sequence complete. Crew Dragon Freedom, Peggy, John, Ali, Ray, congrats on this historic achievement. Welcome to the International Space Station.
Thanks. We really appreciated flying with SpaceX. It was a lovely ride, and as I mentioned, it was the softest docking I've ever felt. Very well done. Thanks to everyone for getting us this far.
Thanks, Peggy. We do aim for excellence, and on behalf of SpaceX, it's been a pleasure working with you. And just a little bit of trivia for you, this was the fastest launch to dock time for a Crew Dragon, beating our previous record from Crew 4 by just 9 minutes. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly, and you are good to doff suits per procedure 4.012. Ground will be taking cameras external.
Copy 4012 in work.
Dragon on Dragon to ground. No response required. Cameras are external.
Now that all the hooks have driven and the soft capture ring has been stowed, docking is officially complete. The crew is go to doff their suits. That's why the teams on the ground have told them that the cameras are not live at this time inside the cabin. Again, we still do not have video from the International Space Station at this time. It looks like we'll regain that shortly. The space station itself is in an orbital nighttime, now flying 261 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean. Again, docking this morning at 8:12 a.m. Central Time. As noted by SpaceX, the fastest docking on record for a crew launch to the International Space Station on Dragon. We also have confirmation that the umbilicals have attached from Dragon to the International Space Station. Again, these allow power to flow from the space station to Dragon, as well as data and other telemetry. When in free flight, Dragon uses power gained from its solar arrays and is stored and used from batteries aboard the spacecraft, so connecting to these umbilicals allows it to rely on power generated from the space station. We'll stay live now that we have docked until our welcome ceremony, standing by for the start time for that ceremony. But this hatch open process takes about 2 hours. A look ahead at the steps that will be happening over the next couple of hours. Again, Woody Hoberg, NASA astronaut on the space station, is prime for these operations and bringing the AX-2 crew on board. Now that we're docked, he is securing some hardware, and then we'll move into hatch operations. First, he will open the large hatch at Node 2 Zenith. That'll give him access inside the pressurized mating adapter. He will then help pressurize the vestibule. That's, again, the small space between the hatches on Dragon and the space station. Of course, this was previously exposed to a vacuum prior to docking. We need to fill it with air, make sure its pressure is nearly equal with the atmospheric pressures on Dragon and the station.
Com check on the cabin mic.
And Dragon SpaceX, I had you 5x5 on the cabin mic, but I am seeing that you have both ground and ISS set to PTT. Please set it to only the big loop.
Okay, on the big loop, cabin mic set from Dragon.
And I have you 5x5. How me?
5x5, thanks.
Station on 2 for PMA 3 ingress step 1.
Houston is with you on 2.
All right, just looking for your go in step 1.1.
Stand by 1, and we are checking on that now.
Station copies.
As you heard, teams on the ground communicating with the crew still aboard Dragon Freedom. Peggy Whitson took a chance to test out the cabin mic rather than the microphones they'd been using in their
Houston,
seats.
on the
Now
big
that
loop,
they've
you are
doffed
go
those.
for 1.1 of procedure 2.102.
Copy, go in step 1.1 of 2.102.
And that voice being NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg communicating with Justin Cartledge here on the ground, his Capcom, the capsule communicator. That's the person speaking with the astronauts aboard the International Space Station. Woody is now stepping through some procedures, including he will get access inside the pressurized mating adapter and then pressurize the vestibule. We want to make sure the pressure is almost equal with the pressures on board Dragon and the station. He'll use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into the vestibule. Flight controllers here in Houston will monitor the pressure and temperature readings inside and verify that everything is leak-free before we get ready to open the hatches. Again, it's about a 2-hour process to get everything pressurized and checked out before we open the hatches. And following that hatch open, we'll have a welcoming ceremony with all 4 AX-2 astronauts, as well as our 7 crew members living aboard the station. So if it's not too early for you to do some math, yes, that is 11 people that'll be living aboard the International Space Station for at least the next week.
Houston Station, node 2 overhead hatch open.
Houston copies.
Again, we are live covering the arrival of the AX-2 crew to the International Space Station. This is the second private astronaut mission that has visited the International Space Station following the Axiom 1 flight last year. Our crew members aboard Dragon Freedom today include former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson. Up until now, she has spent 665 days in space, so she's looking to add to that total. It's more than any U.S. astronaut and more than any woman in the world. She's joined by pilot John Shoffner. And the 2 mission specialists representing the Saudi Space Commission are Ali Al-Karni and Rayana Barnawi.
Houston Station on 2, we're ready for step 2.2 on your go.
Checking. You are go at 2.2.
Copy, go.
As we hear NASA astronaut Woody Hoburg stepping through the procedures with the ground's go, he will begin pressurizing the vestibule shortly. In the meantime, NASA astronaut Frank Rubio continues to conduct some hardware servicing on the space
Dragon,
station.
SpaceX on the big loop. If desired, reference procedure 4.400 for monitoring vestibule pressurization.
Confirmation from teams on the ground that vestibule pressurization has begun. Again, this is the small space between the Dragon hatch and the space station hatch. We want to bring that up from vacuum to about 14.7 psi. That's about the same pressure as the International Space Station, approximately the same pressure we're used to here on Earth. Astronauts on the space station live in a mixed nitrogen-oxygen environment, again, very similar to what we have on Earth.
And Dragon Station on the big loop, no response required. ISS power connection established.
Houston, station on 2, step 2.4, A pass pressure equalized at 1339 GMT.
Houston copies 1339 GMT.
You can see some movement, and we have our view back of Dragon. As we see a sunrise in the background, this view of Dragon Freedom with the AX-2 crew aboard docked to the Node 2 Zenith port on the International Space Station. Again, that docking coming at 8:12 a.m. Central Time. The crew inside are now out of their suits. They are preparing for ingress to the International Space Station. Again, this is a process, though, so we are pressurizing the vestibule, the space between the two spacecraft. And if you see some color changes, that's because the International Space Station and Dragon are now flying into an orbital sunrise. They are 268 statute miles over the South Pacific Ocean. Now that they're docked, these two will travel 17,500 miles per hour together, seeing 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. So the AX-2 crew is certainly in for a treat for their planned 8-day stay. Here in Mission Control Houston, teams are handing over from the Orbit 1 shift to the Orbit 2 shift. We have had Marcos Flores as our flight director this morning. He will be handing over to Vincent Laporte. Again, Woody Hoberg aboard the International Space Station is leading the team's...
Freedom, Houston, stand by for hardline audio config.
Freedom is standby.
NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg working to pressurize the vestibule, the space between the hatches. Again, this takes about 2 hours before the crew members float aboard the International Space Station. All 4 Axiom 2 crew members still in Dragon Freedom, as you see there, docked to the Node 2 Zenith port. Once they float aboard, they will conduct a welcome ceremony with all crew members before heading into a safety briefing. These private astronauts trained for many contingency scenarios down here on the ground, but the teams aboard the International Space Station will help show them different locations and procedures now that they are on orbit. Later today, the Dragon Freedom crew will work to transfer some cargo from Dragon to the International Space Station. That includes some of the scientific research they'll be doing this week, as well as hardware or food needed.
Freedom Houston on the big loop for a comm check. Hardline audio configuration is complete.
Freedom has you loud and clear on the big loop hardline.
Good news.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, permission to come on board with cameras.
should come on board now, but we'll probably have to ask you to go away again in a little bit. Welcome aboard.
Copy that. We'll keep them exterior until you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Recently, you heard a call from Mission Control in Hawthorne at SpaceX headquarters, checking with the crew to see if they could turn cameras on the spacecraft. They'll hold off for a little bit longer on that, but we still have all 4 crew members aboard. It has now been 41 minutes since they docked to the Node 2 Zenith port, making their official arrival at the International Space Station. On the space station side, NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg is preparing the APAS hatch for opening.
And SpaceX Dragon on the big loop, just to let you know, we've got all four suits drying. The shortest timer is at passing 7 minutes right now.
Copy all. 4 suits drying, and 7 minutes have elapsed. And Dragon with suits drying, I can give you a go for sections 1 through 3 of 4.400.
Copy 1 through 3 of 4.400.
Again, you're watching live coverage of the AX-2 crew arrival at the International Space Station. The crew docked Dragon Freedom to the Node 2 Zenith-facing port this morning at 8:12 a.m. Central Time.
Dragon,
and that
this is Ray for food inventory and water inventory.
Copy that, Ray. Ready to copy for inventory.